What's up, YouTube? This is Too Raw Media. Alright, so former NBA player Dennis Scott said something that is a little bit controversial. In a recent interview, I put a link to this article in the pinned comment in the comment section below. A lot of us remember Dennis Scott. He played in the NBA from, I believe, 1980. Was it 89? I think it was, I want to say 1989 to maybe 99 or 2000 or somewhere in that range. Let's just say the 90s. And for the most part, he's known for his stint with the Orlando Magic. His best season by far was the 1995-96 season, when he set a then record for threes in a single season with 267, and that would be the record for about 10 years until Ray Allen surpassed him back in 2006 with 269, and that was a record for about a dozen or more years until Steph Curry broke that with 273, and then Steph had another season where he broke it again with 286, and then Steph had that unbelievable year with 402, which is still the record. But Dennis Scott recently said in his opinion, he's the fourth greatest three-point shooter in the history of the NBA. Fourth greatest. Behind three noteworthy shooters. So in his eyes, he's he's number four behind Steph, Reggie, and Ray. Matter of fact, he says, let's see if there's some audio I can play instead of me reading it. No, I don't see any audio, but this is what he said. He said, obviously Steph is number one because he has always shown us all the way back to his Davidson highlights in his early years when his ankles were messed up. It's his movement. His movement always separated himself from all of us. Reggie was great with moving without the ball. Ray was great moving without the ball. But Steph took it to another level. Then he could shoot with either hand off the dribble. That's why it's so much fun watching him operate. So he's number one. You can flip-flop Ray and Reggie at 2 and 3. I'm trying to go off of percentages in my head. I believe Steph is somewhere in the 42% range, 42 point something. Might be 42.6%, 42.7, 42.8, somewhere in that range. When you consider that high percentage plus the prolific way in which he shoot threes, I no longer question him being the greatest two-point shooter. And all the multifaceted ways he could shoot, either hand, catch and shoot, creating his own shot, fade back, range, I gotta give it the stuff. Reggie shot 39.5% for his career, which is still great. But you gotta remember, Reggie didn't play with his entire career damn near with a guy like Klay Thompson who could help space the floor more. Now, earlier in his career, he had Chuck Person, but Person was only a 36% three-point shooter. Well, I can say only, but Chuck was good, and Chuck was one of the first long-range shooters, long bombers, but for the most part, Reggie didn't have another guy on that level that could shoot the rock consistently for most of his career. But 39.5% in the 90s, and even today 39.5% is great, but 39.5% in the 90s was phenomenal. Ray is at 40%. He played 18 seasons, I believe it was. Reggie played 18 seasons. Dennis Scott, I think, was 39.9% for his career. The year that he hit 267, if memory serves me correctly, he shot like 42.7 or 42.8% from three. Around 43% from three. To be honest with you, I would rather put a guy like, if I had to do it in my head, I would put Glenn Rice ahead of Dennis Scott. Um, when when Glenn Rice got hot from outside, um, the only guy that I saw that that has exceeded that or rival that, in my opinion, is Steph. But when Glenn Rice was hot, he was the best shooter that I had ever seen up until recently. Um, I would give it to Glenn Rice. He shot 40%, over 40% from three for his career in the 90s. Yeah, I would rank Glenn Rice ahead of him. Um, and there's some other candidates as well. Um, but, I mean, if you're talking about top 10, you know, Dennis Scott is up there. He's definitely up there. But, I don't know about, hell, Klay Thompson I would put ahead of Dennis Scott. So I don't know about number 4. You know what I'm saying? And that's another thing. Klay Thompson is quickly becoming a very underrated player, man. At one point, back in 2016, 2017, I was starting to think that Klay was becoming overrated. But now, he's becoming extremely underrated. It's crazy. But anyway, that's all I got to say on this one. Give me you guys' opinion, man. Do you think Dennis Scott is the 4th greatest 3-point shooter? Because I would put him a little bit lower than that. I mean, you can make an argument that he's top 10, but then you could also make an argument that you could put some guys in this era ahead of him. Because I do remember Dennis Scott being a guy that could catch fire. He had phenomenal range for that era. I've seen Dennis Scott make threes from close to the logo, 30, 35 feet out. I've seen him do that. I've seen him make some tough threes, some clutch threes as well. And he was probably one of the first. He probably was the first guy, along with George McLeod, that one year, the same year I believe. I think McLeod hit 257 that year, or 259, one to two. But he was one of the first guys to really weaponize that three. Now you could argue John Starks, but Starks was a little bit more. He was a lot more erratic. Whereas, a guy like Dennis Scott in his prime was always like 39 to 42, 43%. Starks was around 33, 34, 35%. Maybe 36% in a good year. He wasn't quite the sharpshooter that those other guys were, even though he did take a lot of threes. But anyway, that's all I got to say about it, man. Tell me what you guys think.